Among cracks in the ceiling and dusty memories, Grace navigates a life paralyzed since Ethan left. Her meticulous precision hides a heart that does not dare to follow. But when a familiar handwriting appears on a coffee cup, autumn brings more than fallen leaves. It brings the possibility that some losses may finally be breathed. Hello, my friends. I am Linda, and this is Linda Love Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. On the morning when autumn arrived, Grace Whitman woke up before the alarm clock went off. It had been a habit for the past 2 years, her body alerting her that life continued to move, even when she would have preferred to remain still. Lying in the king-size bed that now seemed much too vast, Grace observed the white ceiling where small cracks formed a map she already knew by heart. At 32, Grace had built a respectable career as an interior architect. Her keen eye for details and her ability to transform abandoned spaces into places full of life had earned her recognition at the architectural studio where she worked. But the irony was not lost on her. She, who knew how to give soul to empty walls, had still not found a way to fill the void in her own apartment. With automatic gestures, Grace followed her meticulously planned morning routine. The list of tasks was already memorized. Brush her teeth for 2 minutes. Shower in no more than 8. Put on the clothes laid out the night before. Prepare a simple coffee. There was no more cinnamon in her pantry. The last can had remained untouched for months after the accident, until Grace threw it out, unable to bear the aroma that brought too many memories. In the bathroom mirror, she examined her oval face framed by brown hair that she kept at shoulder length. Practical, uncomplicated. Her green eyes seemed brighter against the soft dark circles that not even concealer could completely hide. Grace applied the pink lipstick, the last item of her morning routine, and checked the clock. 6 minutes ahead of schedule. Before leaving, she glanced around the living room. On the bookshelf, Ethan's camera remained untouched, covered by a thin layer of dust that Grace couldn't bring herself to clean. Beside it was a photo of them at an amusement park, Ethan with his broad smile and bright eyes, his arm around her, while Grace looked at the camera with an expression of happiness that now seemed to belong to someone else. Ethan Whitman had come into her life like a whirlwind of spontaneity. A wedding photographer, he captured not just images but emotions. "You see shapes and structures, I see stories," he used to say. Where Grace planned, Ethan improvised. Where she hesitated, he moved forward. Their marriage had been a dance of opposites that complemented each other, until the morning he didn't come home. Grace closed the apartment door firmly, as if she could lock the memories inside. In the elevator, she checked her watch again. She was still early. A few blocks away in a small makeshift workshop at the back of a building under restoration, Caleb Morgan ran his calloused hands over a piece of ancient wood. At 34, the fine wrinkles around his blue eyes told stories of distant landscapes and sleepless nights. His athletic body, shaped by years of military service, moved with precision as he worked on restoring a century-old handrail. The transition from military medicine to carpentry wasn't planned. After 8 years of saving lives in conflict zones, Caleb returned home with medals of honor and nightmares that no medication could soothe. It was carpentry that offered what no therapist could, a purpose that demanded total presence, attention to detail, and infinite patience. "You were always like this," said Iris, his younger sister, "fixing what others broke." Iris Morgan, at 28 years old with inexhaustible energy, was an occupational therapist at a rehabilitation center for veterans. Unlike her brother, who carried his past as a burden, she seemed to glide through life with a quiet faith in tomorrow. Her hair always tied up in an effortless bun, and her easy smile hid a wisdom that even surprised Caleb. Some burdens weren't meant to be carried alone, she had told him the previous week during one of the Sunday dinners they shared. What you keep inside needs to be handed over to time and truth. Caleb knew exactly what she was talking about. The folded napkin in his pocket weighed like lead, despite being just paper. On it, a name written in handwriting that wasn't his, but one he had learned to imitate perfectly over 2 years. A name and a small house drawn with a pen. Looking at the clock in the shop, Caleb carefully put away his tools. Today would be different. Today he would deliver to time and truth what he had been carrying. In the architecture studio, May Carter examined the plans for an old chapel that was to be converted into a community centre. At 58, May had earned respect in the competitive world of architecture, not only for her talent, but for her ability to identify and nurture her team's potential. Her grey hair framed a face marked as much by time as by laughter, and her colourful framed glasses revealed a personality unafraid of being noticed. "Is Grace late?" she asked no one in particular, looking at the empty chair in the meeting room. It was unusual. In 2 years of working together, May could count on one hand the times Grace Whitman hadn't arrived at least 15 minutes early. Since the accident, the young architect's punctuality had become almost obsessive, as if arriving early could somehow make up for all the goodbyes she never had the chance to say. May knew Grace's worth not just as a professional, but as a person. She had observed the painful process the young woman had gone through, the denial, the contained anger, the acceptance that seemed more resignation than peace. She saw when Grace's exuberant creativity transformed into impeccable technical precision, but without the soul that once characterized her projects. She called saying she missed the bus, one of the assistants informed. She should arrive in 10 minutes. May nodded, feeling a twinge of concern. Grace never missed the bus. The rain was falling lightly that morning, like a beaded curtain distorting the city's colours. Grace ran along the wet sidewalk, her bag bouncing against her hip, the umbrella barely able to protect her from the wind changing the direction of the drops. Her mind quickly calculated, 5 minutes late, 7 if the traffic light didn't cooperate, 8 if the receptionist was on the phone. She hurried past the corner cafe where she used to stop with Ethan on Sunday mornings. The smell of roasted coffee wafted through the door whenever a customer entered or exited, an aroma that always made her hesitate, even when she was in a rush. "Grace!" The male voice, firm and low, made her stop abruptly. She turned, the water running off the edge of the umbrella and dripping onto her shoes. A tall man with short dark brown hair and a well-trimmed beard held a paper cup. His blue eyes had an intensity that made her instinctively step back. "Yes," she replied, her hand tightening around the strap of her bag. "It's yours." He extended the cup toward her. It was then that Grace noticed the handwriting on the cup, her name written in a script she knew better than her own. A G with a wide loop, and that final stroke that looked like an accent, like a little musical signature that Ethan always made. The world seemed to slow down. The sound of the rain, the horns, the conversations on the sidewalk, all diminished until they became just a distant hum. Grace felt the cold climbing up her spine, as if she had plunged into icy waters. Where did you get this?" Her voice faltered, almost a whisper. "I bought it for you," he replied, and she noticed his discomfort. "I thought you needed it." "But this handwriting—" The stranger seemed to hesitate, as if weighing his next words. "I work in the restoration of the chapel," he finally said. "I thought a coffee would help with the rainy day. My name is Caleb." Grace accepted the glass, her fingers trembling. Caleb offered to accompany her to the next block because of the rain, but she declined with a quick nod, walking away in hurried steps, her heart pounding in her chest. In the meeting room, Grace couldn't concentrate. The lines of the architectural plans seemed to dance before her eyes, and her pen slipped from her damp fingers. May noticed her state and approached discreetly. "Take 10 minutes," she whispered. "Catch your breath." Grace nodded, grateful for the understanding. She went down to the building's lobby, needing to organize her thoughts. That was when she saw him. Caleb was sitting on a bench near the entrance, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the ground. Something compelled her towards him. Fear and curiosity waged a battle in her chest. "That handwriting," she began, trying to keep her voice steady. "It was my husband's." Caleb raised his eyes and she saw there not surprise but a silent recognition. "I know." he admitted. Silence. The rain drummed against the lobby windows. 2 years ago, Caleb began, his voice grave but gentle. I was returning from a shift as a civilian paramedic. I had left the army not long before. I was one of the first to stop at the pile-up on the highway. Grace felt the air escape from her lungs. Her legs gave way, and she sat down next to him on the bench. I stayed with your husband until help arrived, Caleb continued. He was conscious for a few minutes. He said your name, described how you wrote your G, he gestured in the air, and mentioned that you drew houses on napkins. He asked me to tell you that you have a way of giving shelter to what hurts. Silent tears streamed down Grace's face. Ethan's words, his unique way of seeing the world, reaching her 2 years later. And why? Only now? She asked, her voice choked with emotion. Guilt, Caleb admitted, his voice hoarse. I thought it was too little, that nothing I said would make a difference. But I keep a napkin he had in his pocket, with your name and a little drawing. I learned to write like him. I wanted, when I finally found the courage to look for you to know it wasn't a fabrication. In the following days, Grace watched Caleb working on the restoration of the chapel. His skillful hands treated the old wood with respect, as if conversing with the fibres, asking permission to transform them. It was a meticulous job that required patience, something Grace was beginning to relearn. Why do you do restoration? She asked one afternoon while he was sanding an old bench. Caleb pondered for a moment before answering. Because what is good doesn't need to be new. It just needs to be cared for until it breathes again. The answer hit Grace like a revelation. Wasn't that what she did professionally? Breathing new life into abandoned spaces? Why couldn't she apply the same principle to her own existence? Gradually, conversations between them flowed more naturally. Caleb talked about Iris, about his years in the army, about the desire to rebuild his life without denying the past. Grace shared memories of Ethan without shedding tears, a small victory that did not go unnoticed. That night, Caleb revealed during an impromptu lunch at the chapel under renovation, Ethan asked me to buy a cinnamon coffee for Grace when possible. It seems like today it finally happened. Grace felt something open inside her, like a jammed door finally giving way. I ask for signs, she confessed, teary-eyed. But I think I'm afraid to recognize them when they arrive. One afternoon, a heavy rain forced the team to halt work on the chapel. Grace remained alone inside the building, among scaffolding and protected stained glass. Sitting on the wooden floor, she did something she hadn't done in a long time. She prayed softly. Lord, I do not know how to proceed. If the right time still exists for me, if I can let go of fear, if this is not all madness, guide my steps. Please show me what to do. As if responding to her plea, the rain gradually subsided. A beam of light broke through the high window, illuminating one of the already restored benches. On it, there was a brown envelope with her name written in that unmistakable handwriting, the embracing G. With her heart racing, Grace opened the envelope. Inside, she found Ethan's ring, lost in the accident, and a folded sheet with a message. If you find Grace, tell her she is not late. She just needs to walk. Her time is gentle. Signed, Ethan, with that characteristic line at the end. At the chapel door, Caleb watched hesitantly. I received this yesterday, he explained when Grace noticed him. A rescue colleague found the record of your case and located me. I almost ran away again, but I remembered his look that night. And what Iris always says, the truth heals when it arrives in its own time. In the weeks that followed, Grace and Caleb worked side by side on the restoration of the chapel. It wasn't romance growing between them, but something equally valuable, shared understanding and healing. On the day of the reopening of the space, now transformed into a welcoming community centre, Grace installed a small shelf with napkins and pens. A discreet card read, "Write the name of someone you love." The right time finds those who wait with an open heart. May gave an emotional speech about renewal and second chances. Iris smiled from the back of the room, proud of her brother. And Caleb, with a cup of cinnamon coffee, approached Grace. "For you?" he said, handing over the cup with her name written in that welcoming G. "It's not chance, it's care," Grace murmured, touching the cup reverently. "Care that chooses to stay," Caleb replied. That night, surprising news arrived. Grace's studio had been chosen to lead a series of community space restorations. The project was funded by a newly established foundation named after Ethan, created with donations from the couples whose weddings he had photographed. Among the thank you notes there was a phrase that Ethan once shared with one of the couples. "If one day I am no longer here, keep building places where life begins to breathe again." Grace kept Ethan's ring in a small niche of the restored chapel, not as someone clinging to the past, but as someone honouring the journey travelled. She finally understood that true love is not replaced, it continues in unexpected ways. As she left the celebration with Caleb by her side, Grace didn't rush to cross the street. For the first time in a long time, she walked at a leisurely pace, confident that she would arrive exactly when she was meant to. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.